Dear Prime Minister Morawiecki, distinguished members of the Polish delegation, State Secretary Gohold, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all here on behalf of Körber Foundation, and of course we are particularly happy to have you here, Mr. Prime Minister, at Körber Foundation in Berlin during your official inaugural visit to Berlin. It's a great pleasure for us to have you here. It is exactly 2 years ago that we had your predecessor here also as a speaker, Madame Szydło, at Körber Foundation, and we are happy that we can continue this with your visit, and hopefully this is turning out into a good tradition. Your visit today, Prime Minister, and the inaugural visit of Foreign Minister Czaputowicz a couple of weeks ago, during which we also hosted him at Körber Foundation, underlines the strategic importance of German-Polish relations. For Richard von Weizsäcker, our former federal president and long-standing chairman of the Bergedorf Roundtable, our oldest project of Körber Foundation, the enlargement of the European Union 2004 was, as he put it, the happiest days in German history. Poland and Germany are located at the heart of Europe, and together we face the task of shaping Europe's future. This will not be possible without reassuring ourselves of and reassuring and addressing the very foundations of our relationship time and again. The intensive exchange and dialogue between Poland and Germany is therefore all the more important in times when relations face multitude of challenges. The dispute over the controversial judicial reforms in Poland has, for the first time in history of the European Union, led to opening of the Article 7 procedure and weighs heavily on the relations with Brussels. Refugee policies, the topic of redistribution, remain on the agenda, as well as the forthcoming budget negotiations. Not least, a law that places under punishment the attribution of a shared guilt of Poland in Nazi crimes has received a lot of international attention and criticism. Maintaining the cohesion of the European Union will be the central challenges for our two countries in the coming years. Are we still on the path of an ever closer union, or on the road of a two-speed Europe? Can there be a compromise between the two ideas? How can we balance federal ideas on the one hand and a Europe of the fatherlands on the other hand? What economic and financial policy guidelines are necessary? And how can domestic and political developments in member states be brought into harmony with the values of the European Union? The good news is that our bilateral relations rest on a stable foundation. According to a survey that Körber Foundation has conducted in September last year, 79% of the Poles and 69% of the Germans want closer bilateral cooperation and relation between our two countries. History and identity continue to play a major role in our relations. Poland commemorates the centenary of its regained statehood, while at the same time the year 2018 marks the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. While in our survey, 53 of the Poles support a picture of history that focuses on achievements and victories, only 29% of the Germans support such a picture. So there is a difference in that regard. But when it comes to the question of common values, both Germans and Poles are convinced that without an independent jurisprudence and courts, there can be no just society. 85% of Poles agreed and 93% of Germans. And both the Poles and the Germans in our survey consider a functioning democracy without political opposition with a large majority unthinkable. For us at Körber Foundation, fostering understanding between Germany and Poland in a common Europe has always been a high priority. Our Bergedorf Roundtable has met more frequently in Poland than in any other EU member state. And in June this year, the Bergedorf Roundtable will once again return to Warsaw and we will discuss current challenges facing for Europe. Poland also plays a very important role in our U-Story history network. The network links civil society organizations in 25 European countries that conduct national history competitions. It is a matter of encouraging young Europeans to work together and addressing central contemporary issues of European and regional history. Together with Germany, Poland was a founding member of this U-Story network, and today the Polish competition is one of the network's most important and successful ones, and our partner organization Carta is doing a really great job. 20 rounds of the competition in Poland have been launched so far, and almost 13,000 school children have submitted 8,000 contributions to local and family history. I think this is a really good success story. So let us not lose sight of one thing, that despite of all the differences that we might have in some of the issues, reconciliation across the Oder and Neisse River remains a historic achievement, as well as the good neighborly relations between Germans and Poles. And I think it is also an historic achievement that we are close allies today within NATO, defending collectively our security. Prime Minister, we look forward to your remarks, and we thank you very much for your willingness and openness to, after your speech, engage in a discussion with us. And the discussion will be moderated by the head of our International Affairs Department, Nora Müller. Our founder, Kurt Körber, was committed to facilitating dialogue in international relations. His motto was, and it is still the motto of Körber Foundation, it's always better to talk to each other rather than about each other. As an entrepreneur from Hamburg, Kurt Körber provided an impetus to European relations and European unity. The Körber Foundation has its roots in Hamburg, and this is where our headquarters is until today. And so we are very happy that you, Mr. Prime Minister, did not only spend some time in Frankfurt during your career, but also in Hamburg studying European law and economic integration. I would like to thank the Polish ambassador, Mr. Przewemski, and his team for the excellent cooperation in making this event happen. And I once again welcome you all for coming here today. Mr. Prime Minister, great pleasure to have you here. You have the floor. Thank you.
Well, I hope it's not a tradition to host every 2 years a new Prime Minister here from Poland. But anyway, dear ladies and gentlemen, first let me thank you for inviting me to this great place of discussion with each other and not about each other. I like this phrase a lot. I think it's a very wise summation of why discussions like this and presentations of different point of view are important. My main point today is that we have to rebuild trust in the European project. We have to rebuild trust in Europe. And this is because of many crises which happened in between today and last 10 years, beginning with the economic crisis and financial crisis, and then crisis of migration, but also a crisis which is less spoken about and was recently quite broadly commented in Davos. It's the crisis of inequalities, or growing inequalities around us, which people in the political elite, in economic elite, financial elite, tend not to see sometimes. And this is a very important ingredient of the current increased temperature, so to say, in the overall situation in Europe, in the world, but in Europe as well. In the new grand strategy which we need today, I was looking around, looking back into the recent history of Europe, and there were moments similar to this where we also needed to have some acceleration, some push, or like Roman Herzog, the president of Germany, said in his famous Rückrede in 1997, a push forward towards new social and economic dimensions to actually find new ingredients of economic growth and positive social thinking, like in the Schuman Plan or the SPAC report, or in the most recent times, the Delors report. And what could this grand strategy consist in? I would name three major foundations. First, it's solidarity and democratization. Second point is strong Europe, strong defense within Europe, and better border protection. And my third pillar of this strategy would be Industry 4.0, in particular Industry 4.0 in the context of the Mittelstand, in the context of small and mid-sized enterprises. And maybe one more statement as backdrop of the whole new strategy, which I would like to outline to you, about the current social contract. Current social contract seems to me more and more obsolete. What was actually the social contract in the post-war era? It was so to say, a promise to the wider population, to the middle class, that you may have a better life than your parents if you work hard. The unemployment will be in check, will be under control, and you can have better or much better life if you work hard, if you learn. And this worked for 60 or 70 years. But it seems to me that it's not working very well any longer because of some new phenomena, for some new conditions which happened around us. And in particular, because of unhealthy trio, I would call it like this: inequality, inequity, and injustice. And this was very strongly felt in Poland, and it's instrumental for anybody who would like to understand what is going on in Poland, which I wouldn't like to focus too much on our internal situation, but it's very important to understand why this government and our political camp has such a huge popular support, notwithstanding all the pressures from outside, from inside, and from all over the place. This is because this unhealthy trio, inequality, inequity, and injustice, we try to address those. We do this in an imperfect way, but we try to address those. And people scream for a new deal, for a new deal. Not only in Poland. I know the situation in the United States quite well, and this is very well visible on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, but also in Europe. When you think about the recent elections, and yes, the situation calmed down in France post-election, but actually two extremes, Marine Le Pen and Mr. Mélenchon, together got almost 40% of the popular vote. So there is still a very high temperature around us, and we need this new deal. Or in a more economic context, we need the new Bretton Woods. Not in the sense of new fixed exchange rate, but new mechanisms of governing, new regulatory mechanisms in the area of cybersecurity, tax havens, or dealing with international monopolies. I'll talk about this in a moment. So what could it be, this new Bretton Woods and the new deal? For me, the basic rules of capitalism capitalism are not written in stone. And there is a constant evolution of capitalism, and new regulatory framework is creating completely new situation for businesses, for sectors, for population in different countries. And in particular, the most important question is whom the government is for. Not so much how big is the government, because the governments in Scandinavia are relatively big in terms of public expenditures or the size of public expenditures, or in Germany indeed. But who is better in addressing the challenges of nowadays and challenges of tomorrow? And I think to understand, to find appropriate reply is also, we also need to understand what changes happened in the context of free market, of capitalism. And here, the tangible assets, so to say, machinery, equipment, land, plants, have been more and more replaced by platforms, communication systems, intellectual property rights, or some systems which were determined by regulators. And we have to think about more democratic access to those platforms, because even today, when we look around, what are the biggest companies in the world? The 4 or 5 biggest companies: Microsoft, Google, of course, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. These are all network type or platform type companies, worth hundreds of billions of euros, with profits in the range of between 20 to 40 billion euros every year. And they do not pay taxes, by the way, or not too much, or not proportionately to their activity here in Europe. So Chancellor Merkel was absolutely right saying that these companies pay taxes nowhere, or nirgendwo, and we have to deal with this. And this has to be also one critical aspect of how the new regulatory framework and the new system should look like. In this very context, I would like to emphasize the situation of global monopolies as well, because when the antitrust law was created 100 years or 120 years ago, there were no global monopolies. Back then, there was, in the times of the famous Sherman Act, 1890, under the President Benjamin Harrison, there were local monopolies, like Standard Oil back then, and some others. And the new regulations have addressed those local monopolies. And they worked quite well for 100 years. But in the meantime, in the post-Washington consensus world, the globalization world, the new global monopolies have been created, and they are today dominating powers in the world of economy, and not only in the world of economy. Also, they have a huge influence of our day-to-day life and on politics. And what we need today in the context of this new Bretton Woods regulation is also to think about global antitrust, anti-cartel, anti-monopoly rules, because we deal with the monopolies well on a domestic basis, but we don't know how to deal with them on a global basis. And Europe and the EU will be stronger when its institutions also will be more accountable to people. And I believe what is also happening in Poland is that we try to be as accountable to our people as possible, and some detachment between the electorate or the popular vote, between the people and political elites in some countries, I think, is one of the reasons why there are such tensions all around us and increased level of disagreements with regard to the change needed, who has the mandate for change, and how to really work out and how to really explain the changes to the wider population. And some in Europe are suspicious of popular vote. I'm not. I think we have to be in dialogue with people as closely as possible. And I also think that this too much of top-down, opaque decision-making process is not good and can only lead to further jingoism or xenophobia, and we want to avoid all of those. And also, when you look at Brexit, it was rooted in this type of dilemma: who decides about what, elites versus the popular vote and more democratic control. So, from Germany and from Poland, there is also one other voice heard more and more loudly. Let's focus on single European market. This is a very important achievement, and let's complete the single European market. Let's not curb the freedom to provide services, one of the 4 freedoms from the Treaty of Rome. And it's very important for also to understand different dynamics in some Western European countries vis-à-vis some Central and Eastern European countries. Because in the CEE, we look at this from the following perspective. In 2004, where we would have been invited and the accession started, in the context of the European Union, our economies were very weak and quite small and hardly visible for bigger players from Western Europe. So we were all buying the Volkswagen, the Renaults, the technologically advanced products from the West. And slowly but surely we've started also to deliver our services to the West from CEE countries. And after some time, when those little companies, service delivering companies in the construction sector, logistics sector, IT sector, or transportation sector, they were more and more competitive towards their opposite numbers in Western Europe, we face more and more directives coming out of Brussels, more and more regulatory pressure to undermine our relative competitive advantages. And of course we don't like it, because we think that in the post-Washington consensus world, we made some mistake and we sold lots of our assets. We sold most of our industry, most of our enterprises to the Western Europe, rather than having a little bit of development like Western Europe experienced in the post-Second World War, or after that Korea, Japan, Taiwan in the 70s, in the 80s. So protecting our market and letting our small and mid-sized companies grow, we've actually opened our market completely. So all our most important sectors are now in the hands of Western Europeans. One very important commentator from Bloomberg, Leonid Berzhitsky, wrote an article, How Western Companies Colonized Eastern Europe. So it's a strong words, how Western colonized, it's a strong word, isn't it? But we are where we are today, but we also look for some understanding of our idiosyncratic situation domestically, because we know we have to change some of this recent dynamics to be it a win-win for both lungs of the European Union, as John Paul II called the East and the West. So this is maybe for this first pillar of more solidarity type approach, more democratization, and better understanding each other's position and perspectives. Second pillar was about stronger defense system, better border protection. Very important because of what is happening around us. Like 11 years ago, I think at the conference in Munich, which I'm going to attend tomorrow, Mr. Putin made his famous speech, delivered his famous speech about new approach of Russia towards its neighborhood. And he did what he said. He has attacked Georgia, he has attacked Ukraine, and he is doing all sorts of different hybrid war type of aggression all over the place, including maybe the United States, or certainly the European Union, Poland, and other countries. So this Russian question is not a CEE question any longer. It's the European Union question, and we have to deal with this. And I'm grateful for Mrs. Chancellor Merkel that she understands it very well in the context of sanctions. But I do have some reservations towards the German policy towards in the area of Nord Stream 2 and gas supplies, because by cutting off Ukraine from gas supplies, we actually give Ukraine into the hands of Mr. Putin. Today, he cannot afford to attack the interior of Ukraine because of the gas supplies to the Western Europe. 80 billion cubic meter of the 80 billion cubic meter of the gas was supplied just 3 years ago. Today, it's around 50 to 60 billion cubic meters. Once the Nord Stream 2 is going to be built with 55 billion cubic meter of a capacity, the other pipeline system in Ukraine becomes obsolete. So Putin can do with Ukraine whatever he wants, and then we have potentially his army on the eastern border of the European Union. So protection of borders is also crucial for national security, and we agree that we have to strengthen the protection of borders in external borders of the European Union, and also we have to invest more in this. Also in the context of refugees and migrations, which we believe that we have to help those people in situ where they are as much as possible, as it is possible, because in any case there is 100 million of Africans, and we will never be in a position to accommodate how many of them? Tens of millions, maybe, yes, but tens of millions, hundreds of millions. So we have to change our paradigm of how we cooperate with Africa, and the EU should help them in their place of origin. Then I also believe in a strong cooperation of our defense sectors. I'm in favor of building strong European army, and complementary, supporting as a part of NATO alliance. And also when I read quite recently that in Germany there is more trust towards Russia than there is in some survey. I don't know how big a sample it was, but anyway, there is more trust for Russia than it is for the United States. I think to myself that this is probably a little bit of misperception, because whatever we think about those two countries, it's for me it's a complete misunderstanding to treat Russia in a more trustfully way than the United States. I spoke briefly about cyber attacks and hybrid wars. I think we could combine our forces, so to say. We could work together for better joint solutions and how to defend our borders. And in that context, actually, in the past we had borders that were under threat, we may say. Today there are threats without borders, so, and cyber attacks are such a kind of threat. So also I would like to live under Pax Europaea, but today we live under Pax Americana, and this is the state which is still lasting from the times of the Second World War, and for me very important element of the overall security for Europe. And now let me move to the third pillar of this new grand strategy, which is the Industry 4.0, in particular in the context of the middle class and the Mittelstand type companies. Here I would like to emphasize one Achilles heel which I realized very clearly since I joined politics a couple of years ago, and this is the regulatory system and system of creating new regulations, new legislation out of Brussels. Namely, at the time of Industry 4.0 and the fourth industrial revolution, we have to very quickly respond to the regulatory challenges. And Brussels is everything but agile regulatory response. And so sometimes we discuss for too long to find appropriate reply for some challenges where the world is already accelerating, and some other players like China, like the United States, India, can more quickly address those very challenges. In this particular context, I would like to put in front of you an idea of supporting very strongly small and mid-sized sector across Europe, because I believe that this can be a better Schumpeterian challenge for the bigger guys, for the bigger corporations in Western Europe, which feel sometimes too cozy today because they have great allies, friends in Brussels, and at the same time they do not create appropriate response for the future challenges which are ahead of us or next door in China, in the United States and elsewhere. So promoting the small and mid-sized sector is not only good for the democratization, for solidarity type approach, but it's also good to find the new sources of competitiveness across Europe. And also, I think that we should have in the back of our minds that some challenges which became visible in the post-Lehman era have not been dealt with appropriately. Amongst them, too big to fail, and the moral hazard in some parts of the financial sector. And as a kind of response to this, also very important for small and mid-sized sector, I would call for acceleration in in building of capital markets union. Capital markets union is by far not completed and can be a very important complementary element for the whole of the European Union. And also, I think that we have to look for new sources of taxation, not addressing or addressing more evenly all companies, because the bigger companies do not pay taxes in Europe as they should, which the case European Commission again versus Apple proves very well. So diverted profits tax or the digital tax proposed by President Macron, I think are good ideas, or financial transactions tax are good ideas. We should think about them in the future. And also in that context, I think that we should be aware of rapid technological developments which are just ahead of us, just behind the curve. We do not recognize all of those. We know artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, all the digital world is something of huge importance and will be more and more important. But how to capture the value added from different from those aspects in different sectors, we are not so sure, and we cannot cooperate and compete appropriately at the same time. Europe, consisting of 27 countries, has to learn how to cooperate and compete at the same time in a better way. Now, I was also asked to say a few words about differences in the Polish and German identity. Of course, there are many of them, but maybe I'll name just a few. First, national state is very important. Is a bedrock of democracy for us. We didn't have a state for almost 250 years altogether. When you count the communist times, we were left after the Second World War on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain, and we've lost our future, so to say, because even in post-Second World War, after a couple of years of communism, our GDP per capita was higher than in Spain. So when you compare today, our GDP per capita is much lower than in Spain. It's 65% of Spain's, despite 25 years of uninterrupted growth. So this is what we lost during the 45 years of communism, and what we lost during the Second World War. 6 million of our inhabitants, and lots of material losses is also something which is beyond imagination, because we could have been in a completely different position today, one of the most developed countries in the world, with 50 or 60 million inhabitants, and not in the state where we are today. And also, in the modern times of Poland, what we try to find, we try to reconcile the dimension, to reconcile innovativeness with solidarity type approach, social cohesion. We think that the French model is losing its competitiveness, and the Anglo-Saxon model, it's more and more burdened with inequalities, and therefore unacceptable for wider and wider circles of population. Like I've read some stats that in the year of 2017, 82% of the newly created value added went to the pockets of 1% of the richest people in the world, and the lowest 50% of the world, which is 3.7 billion of a population, got zero, got nothing. So clearly for me it's a sign of there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. There is something wrong in all this distribution of wealth, and collectively in the European Union we have to think about how to address this. Also to endure, to ensure further development of globalization, and support for globalization, and support for technological changes, for the new industrial revolution, which is good, which can be perfect for all of the world, but underlying mechanisms of pre-distribution and redistribution have to be rethought. So just a couple of sentences about Poland and what in the last couple of years happened and was not so much realized by the external world is also we've started to treat our institutions very seriously, and thanks to this we have been able to close our VAT tax gap. And this is a game changer for us, because very weak judiciary system, extremely weak judiciary system, very weak tax offices created an environment where the VAT tax gap was the highest in Europe, the Polish tax gap. We've changed it over the last 2 years, and today we have been able to close this gap almost 3/4 of this. 10 billion additional tax collection, tax gathering from this source only. And we are investing this in more of social cohesion. We're investing this in innovativeness, and this is one of the reasons why the GDP in Poland is growing almost 5%. We have a very healthy economic growth, and economic growth which is supported by majority of the population, because we see more and more equality in terms of distribution of income, and also distribution of respect, distribution of prestige, which is something less tangible or non-tangible, but very important for people nonetheless. And one additional aspect which I would like to bring to your attention in the context of Polish-German cooperation, which is very good in terms of economic cooperation in particular, but not only this, is I will present it on an example of some figures. Poland and 3 other smaller Visegrad countries together, we have a trade with Germany in the size of 270 billion euro. A comparison to France, France is on the level of 165 billion euro. The United States 162, China 167 billion euro. So the 4 relatively small countries of a total population of 65 million people and much less developed today than France or the United States, not to say about China in terms of its size, we have a much higher export and import, and pretty well balanced export and import with Germany, which is indicating how strong our interlinks are today. And I think that German media are far behind in capturing the significance of Polish-German relationships than German businesses and German business community, and I think it should be also realized. So, in summary, this strategy you can call also a strategy of 4 S's: stronger, smarter, safer, and more solidarity-based Europe. This is what I would advocate for. And also, this collaboration of German Mittelstand with Polish small and mid-sizes is exemplary, and it should be also an example for many others. But what I would like to repeat in summary is this new imagination which we have to build about the world of the future. Like the limit, Ludwig Wittgenstein once famously said, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. Die Grenzen meiner Sprache bedeuten die Grenzen meiner Welt. And in this very context, we have to think about the vocabulary for tomorrow. We might not like Thomas Piketty, but actually he's right in many aspects of redistribution, pre-distribution, how to structure the regulatory framework and the budgetary framework of tomorrow. and not the world of Gestern, the world from Gestern. So how to create it, how to find it? I think two critically important elements are I would like to highlight to you. One is to listen more to people, because we have to be able to better address their fears, their concerns, their reservations. And second is a true leadership. Europe needs true leaders today, leaders who would be able to translate those very fears of the public, of people, on the language of economic, financial, budgetary response. People capable of reaching compromise also domestically, and reaching compromise in a very complex EU environment. So, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, I wish that Germany and Poland be the real locomotive of inclusive growth and engine to transform Europe into the better future, and better future for many, for most, and not for few. And strong Europe based on cooperation, solidarity, and trust. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for this grand 40-minute strategy that you laid out before us. I would like to start by sort of taking us back to the present for a moment. Your appointment as Prime Minister was generally seen as a move to mend fences with Brussels to some extent. So I think we are now 2 months into your term in office. Would you say mission more or less accomplished? Are we on track, or at least the way you would hope to be on track?
Mission not yet accomplished, but we are on track. We will do our best that this is a real dialogue rather than two monologues. And also I think that we have to realize that the perspective of the European Commission is different, and they have their own right for it to be different, and they are the guardians of the treaties, and I think that we have to explain to each other the idiosyncrasies of the whole situation in Poland, where we would like to actually change things which had to be changed or should have been changed at the beginning of 90s, and which had been changed at the beginning of 90s in Deutsche Demokratische Republik, like the judiciary system and others. Now we do it much later, but it's better late than never, as they say. So mission not impossible, mission very difficult, but mission not yet accomplished, but on a good way to accomplish this.
Thank you for mentioning the elephant in the room, of course, the Article 7 procedure. And my reading would be that it's neither in Poland's interest nor in the European Commission's interest to go for a fully fledged confrontation here, for a showdown. So I wonder, what is the magic formula in a way? What is the kind of compromise that Poland can bring to the table to, to reach some form of common ground here and to resolve that issue?
Well, again, first we've treated the recommendation 4, which is about Article 7, very seriously. We have actually peeled this onion one by one, and we are addressing the recommendations, particular recommendations, very genuinely. We look for arguments, and we look holistically at the whole judiciary system, because one thing I can guarantee you for sure, I would not be sitting in this chair, Prime Minister of Poland, if I was not, excuse me, believing that the whole reform is not going to create a more independent, more objective, more efficient, more transparent judiciary system. This is actually, for me, a no-brainer. But at the same time, I understand that probably 60% people in this room are somehow skeptical, because it's very difficult for people from outside Poland to immerse deeply in the nitty-gritties of the system in Poland. So I can give you just a couple of examples. I was myself a freedom fighter in the 80s during the Solidarity times. And I saw the same judges which were completely subservient to the communist powers in the darkest communist times, the same judges happily living and giving decisions in the 90s and in the noughties. And of course I didn't like it. So that those guys and ladies who were active participants of communist criminal system, they are active still today. So this is one of the reasons why we do this change. Another reason is that our system is the least efficient amongst all 28 countries of the European Union. We spend 3 times more on the judiciary system, 1.77 percentage points of our budget, vis-à-vis 0.64% of the average expenditures within the European Union. So it's clearly an inefficient system. We didn't have random allocation of cases in a district court or regional court. This is the reform which we have actually introduced from the beginning of this year, which is a very civilized rule. And I could name a number of examples like this, where we have moved the whole judiciary system towards much more civilized, objective, and independent system than it used to be before.
Prime Minister, if I could, what I meant to ask you, in fact, was which elements of the judicial reform that we see right now would you prepare to rethink in order to find some form of compromise with Brussels?
We are in the process of finalizing the so-called white paper. In the white paper, we are going to present our cases, our understanding, our proposition, and we will see what's the reply of the European Commission going to be, so that we will know more about what is the common denominator we may expect in the whole Article 7. Because I believe that the European Commission, putting emotions aside, will be able to understand much better what are the main objectives of our reform.
I understand you're not willing to disclose concrete elements that could be an area of potential compromise.
Well, we'll see what the reaction is going to be from the European Commission.
Let's leave it at that then, Prime Minister. Let's shift a little bit to the issue of Poland's vision for Europe, or possibly also the Visegrad countries' vision for Europe. There was a statement by the bloc in late January, which was generally seen as a bit of a pushback, I would say, against the more federalist, more integrationist ideas that are floating in Paris, but also to some extent here in Berlin. So one thing that I wonder, and that many people wonder, I think, is how can you marry that Visegrad approach, which very much focuses on strengthening the nation state, putting the nation state first, having some form of Europe, of fatherland. How can you marry that approach with the more federalist vision for Europe? Is that irreconcilable, maybe?
Look, when we look at this from the helicopter point of view, it's reconcilable. When we immerse more deeply into the details of both concepts, probably theoretically it's difficult to reconcile. So I'd rather discuss about some concrete proposals, because it's easier then to find a compromise, to find a lowest common denominator sometimes, rather than discussing big mottos or buzzwords of federal Europe, United States of Europe. If we ask people across Europe, probably, if they wanted this United States of Europe to happen in the near future, well, I don't think there would be a majority in favor of this, and certainly not in Poland and not in Visegrad countries. But it's not that we don't like integration, or we think that the whole idea of single European market, closer cooperation in many different fields, including defense industry. Let's stop for a moment here, because what's more nation state type activity than taxation and defense industry? Not too many other aspects, like Schengen agreement or treaty already created one big zone with free movement of people. So, and in the context of defense and taxation, in the context of defense, I'm in favor of more and more common initiatives. In the context of taxation, I was advocating, being finance minister for almost 2 years, for commonly addressing tax havens, consolidated corporate tax base, common consolidated corporate tax base. I was advocating to jointly address VAT tax gap. And so I can, one by one, present to you a dozen or more of very important initiatives where I see huge space for further integration and further harmonization. But then, as many of us in the past, I was studying the European law 25 years ago, and I remember cases of harmonization back then, the famous directive on the curve of bananas and the color of apples and so on. And do we want the harmonization in this field? Probably not, or surely not. So, in other words, my long-winded answer is that if you talk about those very lofty, very big words, federal, United States of Europe, nation state, we are neither here nor there in terms of the United States of Europe. We have to address the challenges of today also through more integration in some fields and maybe less integration in other fields.
Prime Minister, before we turn it over to our guests, there is one more question that I wanted to address, and it's about the act on the Institute of National Remembrance. I think that's the correct way to frame it, also referred to as the new Holocaust law in Poland. And it struck me that in a recent interview, your party chairman, Mr. Kaczynski, said that Germany somehow seeks to water down its historical responsibility for the Holocaust, for the Shoah, and that it was only due to that new law that some German politicians had come forward and had, eventually accepted and taken on Germany's responsibility for its history. So I wonder, you lived in Germany, you studied in Germany, you speak German. Is that an analysis that you share?
Well, I can answer this question with a couple of examples. In the last year, Polish embassies, including the embassy here in Germany, have or had to intervene 300 times to object the expression Polish death camps, Polish Vernichtungslager. 250 times in Europe. And there were many other expressions, many other notions like Polish Gestapo. There was no Polish Gestapo. Polish SS, there was no Polish SS. Polish death camps. There were no Polish death camps. So, and we had to explain it to the audience, or some pogroms. There was no Poland in 1968. There was communist regime who have actually done all the nasty things to Jewish population. So after all those shameful and very wrong attack on Poland's good name, so to say, we had to react, and this is why we have changed it. And by the way, the law signed by the president now was submitted to the Constitutional Tribunal, to a Polish Constitutional Tribunal for further explanation, just in case anybody would like to be sure that there is a freedom of speech, and if anybody would like to emphasize an individual guilt of some Poles who have done very bad things, criminal things to their neighbors. This is of course possible. But one thing which I would like all of you to invite to is to study a little bit the circumstances of Poland under German occupation. Nobody who is not aware of those circumstances or knows a little bit about the occupied France or Belgium or the Netherlands can really feel what was the real situation where people risked their lives while rescuing Jews, risked the lives of their children, their families, and their neighbors. Like probably many of you heard about the Lidice village in the Czech Republic. There was one village in the Czech Republic which was completely annihilated. And the Czechs, I hope the Czech friends forgive me this word, have promoted this well, because everybody knows about Lidice. You know how many Lidice there were in Poland, in the general government in Poland? There were 800 of such exterminated, annihilated, put on fire villages across Polish soil under German occupation. So really discussing this has to be put in the context of what we have lost. 6 million people, we lost our independence, we lost our history, so to say. But at the same time, how critically important it is for us to be accurate on numbers. And we invite all historians from all over the world to work, to make research on who has collaborated with whom and how many atrocities should be attributed to Poles or Jews or Ukrainians or Russians and others. And of course, with taking this out of context, the circumstances of occupied Poland, it's completely inappropriate approach.
Prime Minister, that is an issue we could definitely discuss for hours. We don't have that much time, and I would like to turn it over to the many questions that you have. I think for the sake of time, let's limit this to 3 questions that I would like to pool. You know the rules at Körber Foundation. Briefly say who you are and what your affiliation is, and please also remember that every question should end with a question mark. I have General Whitman, I have Johannes von Ahlefeld, and the lady over there.
Thank you. Klaus Wittmann, Aspen Institute and Potsdam. But to echo your very last remark, I would like to mention that I'm also a signatory of this appeal to erect in the middle of Berlin a commemorative site which exactly recalls what you just said, the circumstances of German occupation in Poland. But I'm also a member of the advisory board of the Committee for the Weimar Triangle, and hence my question. I suppose that from Warsaw one closely watches Franco-German cooperation and initiatives, and that it is in Poland's interest to have a say there. And I think the Weimar Triangle is the right format for that. And using your words from the beginning, it should act as a healthy trio. So my question, what potential does it have in your view? And are you willing to pursue or even activate cooperation in the Weimar Triangle?
Thank you very much. Johannes.
Should I reply now?
Let's collect them and then you could answer.
Prime Minister Johannes Ahlefeld, political advisor to the German Social Democrats in Parliament. What are the key priorities of your government in terms of the Morawiecki plan? Can you outline that briefly? And what's the role of EU financing for the implementation of those projects? And in that light, what is your approach to the EU negotiations on the multi-annual financial framework that has started at the beginning of the year? Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Thank you. My name is Elke Fimmen from EIR. Poland is, of course, a very, very important country for rail transport from China to Western Europe. Poland also has a maritime secretariat of the 16+1 countries. And can you say a little bit more about this, because that defines a very big potential for economic growth and bridge function possibly between Western, Eastern Europe and Asia. Thank you.
From Weimar to geopolitics.
Thank you very much. I'm very much open to the Weimar Triangle format. I was mentioning this today to Chancellor Merkel. I think that this can be a very positive locomotive for further integration, for further to find a better compromise, proximity in different fields. I just wouldn't like it to be a courtesy-based triangle. I think it should be a real platform for cooperation. And let me make one comment how we position ourselves in terms of some policies. Like we think that we are more French in terms of the approach to the defense industry, defense policy, defense expenditures. We would like to cooperate more in this field, and we think that Germany spending at 1.2% of its GDP on military on defense expenditures is a little bit a free rider. So we would be more of together with French in their camp. We spend actually 2+% on defense, but we would be more German in terms of keeping budgetary discipline, keeping public debt in check, keeping overall discipline on public finances and in the banking sector. And from this point of view, we are more concerned than the French of moral hazards, of EU bonds, or communalization of some debt. Some of this already happened anyway by LTRO, long-term refinancing operations. By some of this happened through Target 2 system by ECB. Some of this happened also through ESFS mechanism and ESM mechanism. But much more, not much more should happen. Not too much. We would not support more of this moral hazard. So we are more German from this point of view. So in one sentence, I would support very strongly the Weimar Triangle. To the second question, the backbone of the responsible development plan is the pillar of innovation, reindustrialization, export-led growth, export-oriented growth. So not dissimilar to what Germany has done over the last couple of decades. We are in a very awkward situation because the first 25 years of our development brought us to this position where, I'll put it in euros, 25 billion of euros we pay in dividends every year for owners of capital invested in Poland as dividends for stocks, bonds, interest rates on bonds, on credits and so on, current accounts and so on. 25 billion. And we get net, and our net receipts from the EU funds are around 6 billion euros. So I would like to have it reversed. I would love to be net payer to the budget, having huge current account surplus like Germany has. 8% of German GDP, 238 billion euro, because of your model, because Germany did not fall in this middle income trap. Germany did not fall in this dependent development model. There are two very good economists, Andreas, sociologists at the same time, Andreas Nolke and from Germany, and Ariel Fliegenhardt I think from the Netherlands. And they called our model dependent development model. They found a new typology to name the model of CEE countries. We've made huge mistake. Our GDP growth looks nice at the surface, but actually our economy is in the hands of foreigners. Your economy is in the hands of Germans, and a lot of the economy abroad in CEE is in the hands of Germans as well. So to cut the long story short, this financing of our projects from the EU, we look at this in the context of huge, as Bloomberg calls it, colonization. And we believe that through strengthening of our economy, we do contribute, and we will contribute to the strength of the entire Europe, competitiveness of the entire Europe, and we look at this from a slightly different angle than some of our partners would like to remind us about. By the way, Michel Roth, Minister Roth, and Deputy Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel, a couple of months ago, they have strongly emphasized how advantageous, beneficial it is for Germany and other net payers to pay just, what is it? Germany is net paying 16, 17 billion euro, which is 0.4% of your GDP. So we are paying 5% of our GDP year after year in dividends to your companies and to your citizens. And Germany is paying 0.5% net in some cohesion funds and other funds, which we are grateful for. Thank you very much. But at the same time, please put it in this context. And of course, in multi-annual financial framework, we would like to emphasize some of this, what I said, but at the same time, we also understand that there have to be shifts in some priorities. There have to be changes. I would like to spend more on innovation, on defense, on digital Europe. This is the future I was talking about a couple of minutes ago. So I'm on the same hymn sheet with President Macron, with Chancellor Merkel, with regard to many aspects of multi-annual financial framework. What I would like to persuade our partners to is also to bring more flexibility, so that some countries which would like to spend more cohesion, let them spend more on cohesion. Some other countries might want to spend more on common agricultural policy, so be it. And some others might want to spend more on innovation. I would be a little bit more flexible in those regulations, but these negotiations are still ahead of us. And the last question was about China. We have how to say it? We have started our new era of relationship with China with lots of enthusiasm a couple of years ago. But we do not have too many good projects with China today. We have many more good projects with Germany, with France, with the United States. It's tough negotiations, but it's partner-like negotiations. With China, the negotiations are much more difficult for us. The disparity in trade between Poland and China is 1 to 12. We export to China for $2 billion, and we import goods and services for $24 billion. So how much worse could it be? So I believe that we have to change some of this. And this is the most delicate way I can put it, replying to this question.
Prime Minister, a very final question, very quickly, a non-political question. With Robert Lewandowski as a striker in the national team, is Poland the secret favorite for the World Championship this year?
Yes, we are very lucky that he still is our national player, because the other two, Łukasz Podolski and Mirosław Klose, were kind of borrowed by our German friends. And Mirosław Klose scored the highest number of goals in the German representation. So it was really a good investment, which we made in a good relationship, Polish-German relationship. So yes, Robert Lewandowski is our secret weapon, but I also hope that in this grand finale, Poland-Germany in Moscow, why do you laugh? There will be a very equalized game, but 2-1 for Poland at the end of the game.
We're looking forward to that. Prime Minister, thank you very much. It was an immense pleasure to talk to you. A good example of talking to each other rather than about one another, to be continued, hopefully in Warsaw in the summer.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, for your questions, for actively listening. We invite you for a cup of coffee and a bite of cake. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure.